Hey everyone, Sean here, and today in this video, we really wanted to sit down and talk about the final episode of The Last of Us, or should I say, the last episode of The Last of Us from HBO, and also The Last of Us as a whole for this adaptation, right? There's a number of questions to answer. Is this a good adaptation? What of Joel's actions, right? Did he do the right thing? That sort of stuff. So obviously, this is going to be a very story-heavy video, so spoilers are definitely inevitable. So if you haven't watched it already for the final episode, really, go ahead and watch it. It definitely is still worth a watch, but there are some things worth discussing, including its problems, not only for this episode, but as a whole for The Last of Us from HBO. So let's sit down and talk about it. So I think overall this episode was well done for what it was, right? I think the intensity and everything was all there. The flavor, the just that final bout and everything from Joel. I think this was well portrayed, well acted, well executed for the most part for what was given. And that's like all I can really say. It really boils down to that final battle and everything with the fireflies and all that stuff, and the final one of the final scenes with Marlene, Joel carrying Ellie from the hospital, and then Marlene's trying to beg for Joel for one last time to let Ellie go, right? And willing to look past all that stuff, and Joel had to do his thing and all that stuff. So all that is there. I mean, for what was given, it was well portrayed, well done. So with that, I'm gonna give it probably like a 9 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10 really. But I would like to more talk about the whole thing, right? Now that it's all done and done. I mean, the next question I wanted to discuss here is this a good adaptation? And I think overall, this is a good adaptation, but it does have its very apparent problems. And obviously, the most apparent one, at least to me anyway, is the pacing. They definitely rushed over a lot of things. They definitely rushed over a lot of the sort of supplemental stuff. I mean, I guess it does its job, like very at minimal, to sell us like, oh, Ellie and Joel are like father and daughter to each other at this point. And I guess there is infected in the world with the cordyceps and stuff and everything. But all the stuff that left out kind of left the story kind of being like kind of dry in a way. It's almost like like a overcooked, not even overcooked. I mean, it's basically like a drier piece of chicken, right? Fried chicken at that. But you can still eat it, but it's pretty dry. You can still eat it. You'll be fine, and it definitely is still edible though. And because it's fried chicken, it's got all that seasoning. It's got all the fried pieces and everything, like the fried skin and all that stuff. So you could definitely eat it. It does have that flavor to it, but the texture, the dryness, right? You definitely feel it, and that's definitely what it seems like here. If you want a food analogy for this adaptation, I feel like they've wasted some opportunities, just like they wasted that piece of chicken in a way because it's dry. When it's supposed to be nice and moist and juicy and everything. Even for breast meat, you can definitely cook a breast meat nice and juicy and all that stuff when it's infamously lean and all that stuff. But when you cook it right, it's probably one of the best things you could have in your house. More ways than one. But because all the seasoning and stuff like that, hey, pretty edible still, right? Even if you do kind of mess up on that chicken, you can still eat it, still get all the protein, whatever, blah blah blah. But you are missing out on quite nice things about that kind of chicken. Same thing here. You're missing out some quite nice scenes that really could have added up to the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Of course, also on top of that, the dangers of the world, right? I really felt like the first couple of episodes were really hitting it out of the park to really sell the danger of The Last of Us, right? Right, with the cordyceps. They even added extra scenes with the cordyceps. You know, that doctor in Indonesia, right, or the Philippines or whatever, the southern Pacific island sort of area of Asia, and or maybe it could have made Vietnam. I don't know those areas, right? Somewhere in Asia, right? There was that doctor, and they definitely helped try to sell the danger of the cordyceps, right? How it started infecting the humans, at least in this part of the world. So I guess in their eyes, it's just telling us like, hey, this happened around the world, and so it's still present, right? But with what was given here, we weren't given enough of the infected. It doesn't really help sell the overall danger that it represents, that it was trying to set up for, right? For this adaptation. So that's why the payoff isn't as strong as what it could have been, right? What it could have amounted to. And it's just, so again, we can still take away stuff from it, right? We can still consume it, but we're missing out on some parts, man. We're missing out on some important juicy bits, like literally, right? So that's why I made that analogy. So one of the most important scenes in this entire thing is about Ellie's decision, right? Why did she make that choice to potentially sacrifice herself for the Fireflies, to be potentially the cure for the cordyceps infection? Well, mutated cordyceps infection, right? Because, right, basically she wants to help people be immune of the infection, right? Why? Because obviously the cordyceps infection is dangerous, but if you look at what was presented here overall with this adaptation here, yeah, sure, we had the one big infected scene with the episode with Kathleen and Sam and Henry, right? That saga. We had that one big scene, but then over time, it seemed like those numbers were dwindling down, and you've only seen like one clicker, one infected at a time. And, and especially that time with like Bill and Frank's story, you just seen one. And really, the stars of the show are the humans, sadly. Now, you could argue the same with the video game, but I feel like the first part of Last of Us did a good job balancing out with the infected and the humans, if I can recall correctly. I think I might have been going back and forth with that. So if I am, I apologize for the inconsistency of that opinion. But overall, I think there is a better balance. I think that's an argument I can make in the video game, no matter what, versus here. Here, it's very scarce of the infected, so it doesn't really does a good job really selling that danger that sets off Ellie to make those sort of rash decisions in a way. So I think it definitely misses out on those opportunities, but it still does a job of showing some of the key stuff from like from the video game, like David's saga, and then or the David arc, and then you have the Sam and Henry arc, and you even have like extra character in there with Kathleen, and even extra stuff in there like the whole children die every day, that sort of thing, right? When you have children as potentially the key to curing I hate to say The Last of Us, right? But the cordyceps infection, right? That's kind of like one of the key things to take away from, right? Children are kind of important in a way, but they're kind of just like otherwise shoved off to the side, along with a lot of the important supplemental stuff too. So I think that's the overall points I wanted to get across. It's just that while it does adapt those scenes well, it definitely leaves out, a lot of the things that are, yes, supplemental, but still really important to help sell whatever you're trying to sell on the screen. Even just like with David and Ellie, right? David and Ellie didn't really have enough time together to really build that trust with each other. But in the video game, they're fighting infected. They're like going back and forth, like, hey, we make a good team, that sort of thing, right? It really felt like they're going to be almost like a second Joel and Ellie sort of pairing, right? But with obviously David and Ellie. But of course, what do you know? David is not really a good guy, right? In a world full of bad guys, right? So, sadly, he's kind of a psycho creep who chops up people, blah blah blah, right? So, but it's almost like an unfortunate thing. It's just like, oh man. But then it's like here, you don't really get enough time to get attached to this David. While they try to do some things differently, like they portray him as like a teacher, but then it kind of goes back and forth a little bit. Him being like a teacher, and he becomes a preacher, and then there's that joke about because teacher rhymes with preacher, that sort of thing. And then there's like the extra bits of David being like pretty manipulative, even prior to the reveal, because you can kind of see like with the body language and stuff like that with his men, his henchmen or whatever, his goons, if you will. And funny enough, Troy Baker was one of them, and Troy Baker, definitely, his character definitely showed the most of like that opposition, right? The disagreement against David. Even when he was eating at that scene, he was crying because he's one of the very few people that knows about David's true sort of nature, and he chops up people and makes followers eat people and humans and stuff like that, which is very unfortunate. So that is also some to take into consideration, right? That part of itself it's still adding up to the overall problem of cutting out these key supplemental scenes to really help sell the bonds and all that stuff, the dangers of the world, to really sell you the stories within Last of Us. So I think that they definitely misrepresented and had missed opportunities. And I forgot to say, speaking of Troy Baker, right? Ashley Johnson, who was the original voice actress for Ellie, made an appearance in the final episode as appropriately the mother of Ellie. That's actually really cool. It's like a weird sort of like tie-in, homage, and all that stuff, like a crossover, whatever you want to call it. It's so meta, right? Like the voice actress for Ellie is the mother of Ellie. Like, you know what I mean? It's like this weird sort of thing going on here, but it's kind of awesome, right? That's nice, and of course in that scene there's only one infected, right? Guess what? To try to like minimalize the sale of the dangers of the world, but it still comes off as kind of like short. It still comes off short. But obviously this is with Ellie's mother, and then one key thing to take away from lore-wise is that this is apparently how Ellie became immune, because when you're a baby, right, you're kind of pure, you're still kind of like a sponge, right? So what happened here, I guess she was bitten while she was still like so Ellie's mom was bit right before Ellie was born. So I guess somehow the cordyceps made their way through Ellie, and so because though Ellie is pure, she's still like a sponge essentially. The cordyceps thought this was a cordyceps, right? This is just like a blank canvas essentially, and this canvas has now become the cordyceps canvas. And so that's because of that, they thought Ellie is they thought she was another cordyceps at this point. So that's why she is immune in a way. So she's kind of like half human, half cordyceps, almost kind of thing. Not really, but sorta. Well, that's what the cordyceps thought. That's why they didn't infect her all the way. So that is potentially where there could be a cure for that, but how would you go about it? Like maybe like take the cells and then reproduce those cells from Ellie, and then give it to everyone else. Like would that how the process would go? That I'm not too sure, but I think at the end of it, Ellie has to die essentially. She has to get chopped up pretty much, or at least her brain has to get taken out essentially, and then that's going to kill her in turn. So that's why there's that whole thing with Joel, right? To take action. He loves her that much. Fuck him, because I'm not losing anyone again, essentially, right? He already lost Tess. Of course, Sarah, right? His daughter, and then, he didn't want any of that anymore. So he's definitely not going to lose Ellie because he sees her as his daughter at this point, and goes on a killing spree against the Fireflies. And so this of itself was a pretty cool scene. You do definitely get to see a good amount of action in this particular scene with Joel going through everybody, mowing down and a lot of stuff. But sadly, of course, there wasn't enough infected action because again, that could have been supplemental to really show the trust between Ellie and Joel, that they are a team, right? They are really, really, in tune with each other. Like they make a great team, blah blah blah, all that stuff. I felt like we should have seen more of that to really help sell this storyline. But again, they felt like very minimalist, and you're supposed to believe that this has already been done, even though they're not really showing it. Especially with the video game adaptation, right? So yeah. So far, let's just recap. So far, while well done, there are some key supplemental scenes that were purposely left out because of either time constraints, budgets, or just choice. Really, that's like some of the reasons that could have been possible for these choices, right? It's just probably just like an artistical choice type of thing, and that's how it's really gonna go, sadly. But and this is what I was afraid of, right? This whole like pacing thing could have been an apparent problem, and I think it is, right? By the end of it, again, like the first couple episodes were really big hits, and they were really selling the cordyceps as being this danger, right? I really honestly thought they were really going to show off the cordyceps, right, being a bigger danger in this one than in the video game because of the things they made when it comes to changes, right? One big one was the lack of spores, but instead they're supposed to be like a network, right? So whenever, like I said, like I've been saying, like an immune system within the human body, when there's something foreign, they take action immediately and they just rush this foreign thing and just eliminate it as best as possible. We've seen that, I guess, take action one time, I guess, but it really does not show the whole like, oh, they're networked and stuff like that and stuff and all that. So what happened? Did they just like forget, or did they just kind of just like, okay, let's just say this and then let's have them assume that that's always taking place or whatever, even though it really does not show any of that at all beyond the couple of the first episodes. So yeah, I really felt like that was going to be an apparent problem, or it was an apparent problem, but it is a major problem, I'd say. Once the final episode was done, it's just like, oh, okay, oh, but I guess that is the reality of it. I'm afraid to say. So that sucks in that sense, and that really kind of sells it short of what it's trying to present here for this adaptation anyway. But let's just try to get back on track in a way. So yeah, obviously we have Joel and Ellie, right, coming out of the hospital, and Ellie's just like, what happened and stuff like that. And Joel, of course, Joel has to come up with a lie, and that the Raiders took the hospital or whatever. They attacked the hospital, and Joel and Ellie barely made it out alive. And then Ellie asks him the big question, do you swear that you're not lying to me or whatever? And of course, Joel says yes. And you kind of see it like, that Ellie knows that Joel is hiding something, but then tries to, for now, accept it because, she sees the good person in Joel, even though Joel's actions are, considered heinous and murderous and all that stuff, right? And essentially painting Joel a bad guy in a way. But again, you have to remember this is a world full of bad guys, right? So now we're gonna kind of go away from the review aspect of things, and this is gonna become like a lore analysis sort of way. And I wanted to open this sort of discussion here about with let's just say the actions of Joel and stuff like that. But before I go ahead and do that, I'm gonna go ahead and give let's see. The last episode, let's just say an 8 out of 10, right? If you kind of like review it in the vacuum. But if I were to score the whole thing, I'm honestly going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it really does not sell the final sort of like message well or as well as it could, right? Ellie's decision about curing the infected and stuff like that doesn't really get sold well because of the lack of danger. It really seems like, the number of infected are going down, if like that, or something to that extent. Because we've only seen like one infected, one clicker, one of this, one of that, rather than a small group, pack, or whatever you want to say, herd, if you will. But instead, we've only seen ones or individuals at a time, and that's just kind of a shame. And not only that, we're missing out on the sort of Joel and Ellie bonding. That's like a huge aspect of the story as well. The whole Last of Us, sort of name, kind of gets sold short when Ellie and then Joel's story is kind of like missed out here. Instead, they kind of like chose to put more time into stuff like Bill and Frank's story. And I'm not trying to say that we should cut down Bill and Frank's story for the sake of other stuff. I think this was more of a choice kind of reasoning. I think they chose to cut down on those scenes. I think they chose to do that because they just want to just like go ahead and hurry up and tell or just like show this part of the story. Just tell, hey, this happened and that happened. And we're just expected to believe that the infected are a danger in this world. We are supposed to believe that Joel and Ellie are father and daughter kind of bonding, right? But I think they needed to take more time with this. I think this should have been a 12 episode season instead of the 9. It's pretty weird if you do think about it. It's like. You definitely can see that this is this should have more time with it, right? But that's just how my sort of overall feelings are. It's just they definitely missed out on some opportunities purposefully. They definitely rushed through that. The pacing and stuff like that is the biggest weakness. But while everything else was well acted, Pascal did a great job, Ramsey did a great job, and all that stuff. But there were some missed opportunities with some of the things that they could have had done to really help supplement and sell what the overall message is for this story. And if you're gonna spend less time with the infected, then you should give more time with Sam and Henry, Tess, right? We kind of got something from Bill and Frank, right? That whole love story thing. It was well executed for what it was, but so if you're gonna, cut the infected out, but try to sell the human characters through stories, then sell the human characters through stories. But you didn't, right? So that's why it really comes off short in those areas. So that's why I give it a 7 out of 10 this time around. It's a good adaptation. But there are some very apparent problems with it. I think we can definitely say as a whole. But now I definitely want to open up the can for the lore discussion and answer the question, did Joel do the right thing? And I actually was watching a couple of videos, and of course, I kind of watched Angry Joe's review with his friends. And one of his friends, Alex, I think really put it best, right? And I'm definitely going to mention his points at some point. But overall, I think Joel did the right thing. I think even though, yes, on the outside, I mean, for what his actual actions are, yes, he killed a lot of people there, right? And so you can call it heinous, you can call it terrifying, terrible, murderous, right? Call it what you will, but you have to remember, this is, like I've been saying, this is a world full of bad guys. And guess what? I hate to say it, but even the Fireflies are bad guys. They blow stuff up. They all this stuff. And they have their reasons doing it. And so, and here's the thing, right? And you gotta definitely see why Joel took all these actions. Besides the fact that he loves Ellie like a daughter. Joel has lived in this world for a very long time, right? That's what is implied here. Joel's pretty old at this point in part 1. So Joel has had time with this world after the infection happened. So he's dealt with a lot of people. And what they're really trying to sell also in the background is that Joel has gone through all this stuff, all this, all through the motions, right? He's gone through so much stuff with people. That's why he acts all grumpy and just like the glasses half empty kind of guy, very pessimistic, cynical, and everything in between, right? That's why he acts this way before we had Ellie and Joel start bonding with each other because of all the stuff that he's seen in the world. And so I think in his mind, he knows what the Fireflies are going to do. Right, so the thing is with the whole cure thing, right? This was supposed to be ambiguous, right? Whether the cure was gonna work or not. But guess what? Neil Druckmann kind of like spoiled it and said, yes, this cure supposedly was gonna work. Okay, right, but you have to think about it, right? And I think this was even implied within, I think, like in the audio tapes or the lore, if you read your way through too, because there's like a bunch of notes and all that stuff in between, you get to really unfold a lot of the in-betweens, and these in-betweens are pretty important to help paint the picture overall of what kind of world we're in, right? To really help sell and make this really feel like this is like a world, right? And with the Fireflies, right? So this cure was gonna work, okay. See, that's not the real question at this point then, right? Because we all know that this was gonna work. The question is how this cure was gonna be distributed. Right? And what was implied even in the video game, of course, I believe, in the logs and the notes and stuff like that, if I think, right? Whether it's in part 1 or part 2, was that the Fireflies were going to potentially use this as a essentially a tool to help people be recruited into the Fireflies, right? It's like, oh, if you don't join us, you are not going to get cured or whatever, and build their army, right? And essentially, they were going to be like kind of like, I guess you could call them ultra nationalists, right? Or just like this extreme group to really like help, pretty much like rule the United States, if not the whole world, pretty much. That was pretty much was gonna happen, right? Like even if there is a cure, is there really a cure for as a whole, right? That's a kind of like a question to really think about, right? Is there really a cure, right? Because even if you do have a cure for sort of like the infection itself, it ain't gonna stop you from being shot. It ain't gonna stop you from being torn in half by a bloater, right? You know how bloaters attack, right? They like rip people's jaws off and crush their skulls and just rip their heads off and everything. That's the cure ain't gonna stop all that, man. Like if that did somehow, okay, oh, this is like a super cure, man. This give you like armor and it's give you like imperviousness. It gives you invincibility. Wow, what a cure, right? But no, this is just the infection itself. What it's going to really prevent, right, for you. But you have to think about the stuff around it. How is this cure going to be distributed, if it's going to even be distributed at all, right? Are they really going to spread this to like the Fedra? Are they going to get this stuff to the rest of the world? They want a price on that. They want some money. They want something out of it, right? And at this point in this world, what's the currency, right? What's the currency looking like? So obviously they're going to look for something else, and that's power, right? They're going to want some power gains as they hand out this cure. So this is going to be like a reason for war, right? If you don't join us, you're against us, right? That sort of thing. And so that's why, that's like the stuff I think Joel was starting to see, at least at some point, and realizing that, Ellie's sacrifice is going to be kind of like for nothing in a way. So that's why Joel took these actions, I think. He kind of, I think he saw that. Ellie is essentially a tool for the Fireflies. That's kind of like what I take away from. And in my eyes, I think that's why Joel did what he had to do. His actions were taken because of all this stuff, I think. So essentially, the Fireflies are terrorists in a way, ultranationalists or whatever the term is. In this particular case, I think the Fireflies were just going to be just like they want to take over the world essentially, and they want power, they want fame, they want they want to just take control, and that's I guess you could say they're the monsters, right? That whole cliche, right? In a zombie type of story. Who's the real monster here? Ooh, So that's what I wanted to kind of discuss here. So if anyone agrees or disagrees with that, I mean, I'm all open for a discussion here. Again, Alex put it best from Angry Joe Show with the review. Alex pretty much said those points. And I 100% wholly agree with that, because it is implied. I'm pointing to my PlayStation. That's why I'm doing that. But it is implied from the notes that yes, this is evident, right? That the Fireflies were going to act this way. And you also have to think about even if you even take away all that stuff, you have to remember, right? If anyone who has played the game, right? You have to remember the whole thing with the other 11 children, that were like Ellie. They supposedly all had the immunity like Ellie, but then if you remember from part 2, it was said that they didn't even have a choice. They didn't even get to choose wanting to do it or not, wanting to go through it or not. And of course, they all died. So again, it's like it paints Abby's dad as a definite bad guy, but they're trying to sell the whole Abby thing like we're supposed to sympathize with that, but we can't, because it's what's represented right in front of us, right? Even Marlene was like, you didn't give him a choice, so it's like, okay, so we'll get who are you to sort of like take control of that, to manipulate all that stuff? Who are you to say, right? I forget the in-betweens and like exact context, but that's like the basics, all right? They didn't have a choice, or you didn't give them a choice. That was like one of the lines from Marlene, right? Even Marlene was against it at some point, but then it's like, well, if you look at, humanity as a whole, I think in Marlene's eyes, she wanted to help out the people, but overall, I think the overall grand scheme of things, the Fireflies were going to essentially make this a way for them to have power. This was going to be like a wedge or a leeway or like a ladder, essentially, to step up to the higher level in terms of power. So I mean, hey, maybe maybe not Marlene, but maybe Abby's dad might have tried to rebel against her. I mean, I don't know. That could be cool too. You could have separate Firefly factions, right? The good, obviously now you have the good guys within the bad guys, and then you have the bad guy of the bad guys, right? So that could have been of itself been an interesting way to also throw in there for part 2, right? Potentially, but that didn't happen, sadly. So, so overall, did Joel do the right thing? And I say yes. I think Joel did the right thing in the end. Now, is it fucked up? Oh, absolutely, it's fucked up. It's absolutely fucked up of how it happened. But in that context, right? In that situation, that's pretty much what you gotta do if you loved Ellie that much, right? And you gotta look at the whole grand scheme of things of what was going to happen and all that stuff, like I said before. So, yeah. So in a way, right? Even if Ellie did say, "Oh, I chose to die. I knew this was going to kill me," because I think that's what she said in part 2, right? I believe that's what she said. So whether she knew she was going to die or not, you got to think about all the other outcomes, the possible consequences, how the Fireflies were going to handle this thing. So basically, what I wanted to say is that Ellie is is still a kid, right? She's still young. She's still has a lot to see in the world, and Joel has quite seen a lot in the world. So that's why he has become sort of that realist or pessimist, and Ellie is the idealist and of course the more optimistic type of person, because of course she hasn't quite seen enough just yet. So even by part 2, she's still pretty young in comparison to Joel, of course, right? So that's why it's hard to that's why you gotta kind of take Joel's side here in this case, because of what was gonna happen after Ellie's sort of sacrifice, essentially. So either way, Ellie was gonna die being a tool, essentially, potentially, but pretty much yes, for the Fireflies. And of course, Joel did not want any of that, right? He doesn't want to lose his daughter to be a tool, right? Essentially, that's why Joel took those actions, man. I mean, like it or not, that's the end of it. I think that's the reason for that. So that's pretty much the basic gist of it, right? Were Joel's actions right? I mean, it's definitely, there are opinions for it. I mean, you could say no, you could say yes, that sort of thing, and you can you're right to believe either one. There could be arguments from both sides of it, but that's just how I see it. That's just how I kind of see it with how I perceive this whole story of The Last of Us. It's as much as as a video game, pretty basic, right? It's all about zombies. You're crafting a table. You're going through a linear story and stuff like that. But because of what was written and what was presented here, it was such a special video game story because of all this stuff. It really opens up all these discussions, right? Especially with Joel's actions and all the stuff that happens in this world, and there is so much to discuss from. That's why this The Last of Us is special. That's why it's here. That's why it's so popular, because there is so much to talk about. If you're willing to talk about it, that is. So, sorry if the camera's blurring in and out. I kind of changed the autofocus thing, but hopefully it's mostly focused here. But anyway, if not, then I have to change it back. Anyway, so that is pretty much what I wanted to get across when it comes to The Last of Us in general, right? And what I thought about season 1 as a whole, the final episode for that. But oh boy, then that means part 2 is coming, man. And then that means Pedro Pascal, he's done, man. I think Pascal really helped sell Joel's, the love for Joel, right? With his popularity as well, with his charisma, or the Riz, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's going to be hard to swallow that pill once that bridge comes up, right? And that's going. I mean, I hope they change things to help make it believable of how Joel's gonna go. But I have a feeling they're gonna keep pretty much like the basic stuff intact. So yeah, I guess like one last thing to mention, right? It's just trivial. It's like trivia, but so apparently, I think it was the voice actress for Abby, which was Laura Bailey, right? The famous Laura Bailey. She was one of the nurses during the final scene. So like, when Joel was pointing the gun and everything, and they had their hands up, I guess I was one of them. So I didn't even see that, of course, because they're all masked and they're wearing the hat and everything. So it was kind of hard to tell right away. So yeah, I mean, obviously with Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, you get to see their face, so it's kind of like a little more, obvious. But with Laura Bailey's appearance, that was kind of hard to spot. But anyways, that's all I got for this video here. What do you guys think? Do you guys like HBO's The Last of Us? Do you agree or disagree with what I said here? Anything related in this video, I'd love to see them in the comment section below for a nice friendly discussion. Don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out, and I really do appreciate you guys. So this has been my review for Season 1 of The Last of Us from HBO, and of course the final episode to go along with that, and the discussion for some of the lore stuff, right? Or at least the big ones anyway. So I think Joel did the right thing. So thank you very much, and hope to see you all in the next video. Ciao now.